Great. Thanks for being here, Anna. Julie, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie. I also had the pleasure of working at the ELC. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, and at Colorado State University, I studied watershed science. I'm now working for a company called Hydromet, and we sell environmental monitoring sensors. A fun fact about me is that this year during COVID, I had 2 knee surgeries.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to have 2 knee surgeries, but I guess it's the best time to get it done. Eileen, how are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on here, Hannah. Yeah, my name is Aileen. I have also worked at the ELC with Hannah and Anna at the same time. Unfortunately, I didn't cross paths with Julie, but that's okay. So I studied conservation biology at CSU, and a fun fact about me is, I guess I've been living here in California for 2 years, and I really love it. And Joshua Tree has definitely become one of my favorite national parks, for sure.
That's really fun. I really want to come visit all of you because you're all in like different amazing places right now, but I haven't been out to California yet. So fingers crossed. At some point I will come out there. So I think that we should start by just talking a little bit more about what brought us to environmental education. And I know that we've talked a little bit in the past about what brought us to the environmental field, but I think it's important to discuss how the element of environmental education specifically came up and how you first discovered it, if there was a specific experience or something that first alerted you to the field. So Anna, do you want to start talking about what brought you to environmental education?
Sure, yeah. So I talked about in my previous interviews an experience I had when I was 12 with a national park ranger. And I was just excited about how much she knew. I think I was at Mesa Verde National Park. She just knew so much about the environment, the ecology, the animals, the plants, and about the human history there. And I was just really excited about that. So at that point in my life, the only outdoor occupation that I really knew was being a park ranger. I didn't really realize how much was out there. And then from there, I knew that I liked teaching and I liked interacting with people, but I didn't necessarily want to be a classroom teacher. And so my sophomore year, I guess it would have been the end of my freshman year of college, I interviewed for a job at the Environmental Learning Center because it just seemed like a good step towards doing what I wanted to do, which was working with people outdoors, whether that was being a park ranger or working in a nonprofit like the ELC or somewhere else. Miraculously got the job and worked there sophomore through senior year.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of the people that ended up at the Environmental Learning Center, it was really kind of the gateway job into the world of environmental education. So I think that's really special that a lot of us might have in common. What about you, Julie? What was your personal path?
So the summer before I started working at the Environmental Learning Center, I got a job up in Keystone, Colorado. My grandparents have had a house up there ever since I was probably 5 years old. So I'd go skiing up there, bike riding, and on one of the bike riding trails by their house, there's this place called the Keystone Science School. And I was like, what is that place? And so I looked it up online and I was like, oh, I could apply for a job here. And so I ended up getting the job and spending my summer up there. And that was kind of my introduction to it. I didn't really know what to expect. It was definitely different from the ELC in the fact that it was more outdoor adventure than environmental ed. So it was a lot of just getting kids outside, normalizing them being in nature and hiking. So that was really my first experience working environmental education. And then I transitioned into getting my job at the ELC.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because I think that I don't really consider that environmental education can be so different from place to place and how it's applied from organizations. So that's interesting that you had that experience going into the Environmental Learning Center and seeing the difference between those. And I know that Aileen has been working with a different amount of environmental education organizations through her experiences. But Aileen, what first brought you to working EE?
Yeah, so I would definitely say my internships that I did during college, during my time at college, was definitely my first experience with environmental education. I first did an internship in Boulder. That was when I took a semester off, and kind of was my first introduction to environmental ed. I didn't really get to dive very deep into it and really lead my own programs, but that was my first experience with that. And then going back for a new internship in Grand Canyon and working with the local high school students there, that was just a really great experience because a lot of these kids haven't really gone outside of Grand Canyon, which is kind of crazy. And so they didn't really get to experience a whole lot outside of that small little town there. And so it was really cool just to kind of empower them to be able to try other things and, learn different skills. And that was kind of what started my environmental ed career.
Neat. So I'd like to just kind of off of that open up a question to all of you, and you can jump in as you feel is right. But what do you think, were there specific moments growing up with environmental education? Were you involved with different science programs before college that really showed you that environmental education was a thing, or was it more or something that you discovered in college?
I think that a lot of my experience growing up was going to national parks with my families. And I vividly remember going to every single visitor-centered film. Like, that was my mom's favorite thing to do. So all those memories just kind of stuck in my head of going to the visitor center and kind of what Anna was talking about, like seeing those rangers, especially those female rangers, and being like, wow, they're so cool and they know so much. So I think that was really kind of an introduction pre-college that I had, just seeing all these different places and all these different animals and how cool they were. And then the people that knew so much about it. I think that really ingrained in me kind of a passion for, I didn't know it was environmental education at the time, but just learning about nature and showing people how cool it was.
Yeah, to jump in, I think my experience was pretty similar to Julie's in that I mentioned my parents were teachers, so they had summers off, which meant we spent a lot of time doing some camping and nothing really backcountry, but we got to go to some national parks and state parks. And I did love going to those visitor centers. I was and I am such a nerd. I love going into museums and watching those films and looking at the displays and then getting to hike around and stuff. And then I think specifically at my elementary school, we were really privileged to have a lot of nature close by. And we had a little creek that flowed right behind our school. And my dad, who actually worked at my school, ran this after-school extracurricular club called Creek Club. And we actually got to partner with, I think it was called River Watch is the organization. And basically they gave us the tools to monitor the creek. And so we got to go down and collect insects. And once a year they would come and do some electrofishing and we'd count the fish in the creek. And then every week or so we would take samples out of the creek and measure the pH and all the oxygen levels and that sort of thing. So I think for me, that was kind of the big kickstart and my first exposure as a student to environmental education.
Yeah, I would definitely say that for myself. I grew up pretty nerdy like Anna and just really loving nature and really appreciating all of these new facts that I can learn when we would go outside or on a field trip in school. So I really appreciated that time. But I guess I didn't really realize that I can make a career out of environmental education until I got to college. So, So I did my internship with Grand Canyon and that was awesome. And along with that, the next couple of semesters, I did a wilderness leadership class. And that also really opened up my eyes to being able to teach people about, how to recreate responsibly or just find different ways to appreciate nature, whether that's learning a new fact or kind of, going to a creek or even just hiking. That's just kind of how it all started.
It's really great hearing all of your experiences. And I think that a large part of the reason why we have that disconnect not seeing that we can have it as a career. Is just that, and a lot of your examples were mostly just going to see state parks and talking to rangers, finding experiences in colleges that we wouldn't otherwise have had because it's not part of the school curriculum in a lot of our states. So I was wondering, another broad question for all of you. How do you think that environmental education should be integrated more and more centralized around our school systems?
So I think I've talked about this in the past interview, but here in California, they have the NGSS standard, and it's pretty much just a standard to get kids really that hands-on experience and kind of take them through different learning methods, I guess you could say. And so I love that all schools have to do that, but it can be really difficult for those inner city schools to be able to implement any sort of hands-on experiences like that. So what's really awesome is a lot of kids get to go to, a lot of like 5th or 6th graders get to go to an outdoor science school, and they get to go to that for like 3 days or a week, whatever their school can afford, essentially. And so that's a really awesome experience for a lot of kids. And I would love to see that become like a nationwide sort of thing. And I know I got to experience that in Colorado, and I felt really blessed to have that, that sort of opportunity. And I know it changed my life when I was younger. And I know I've seen it change the lives of many other kids that have come up. And so I think that would be a really great way to start. But I know that's not always financially possible for all schools, or even they don't really have access to the outdoors. So that can be a little difficult, just really finding those other ways that they can experience it.
Yeah, I think kind of going off of what Eileen was talking about, I think NGSS, I think it's Next Generation Science Standards. Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if it's nationwide, but I do know like it's talked about in Colorado, and I think it's like a guideline so you can like build your own state curriculum off of that. But I do think those are like an awesome next step because they are more experiential based and just more like just integrating science into school in general. So I'm definitely excited about where that's going to go in the future as more states kind of adopt those NGSS standards. As far as integrating environmental education into school systems apart from just those standards, I think, Eileen, you were talking about this a bit, just bringing nature into the classroom when a lot of schools don't necessarily have access to nature right there at their schools. You know, there might not be a park within walking distance. They might not have a creek right behind their school like I did. And so I remember when we were working at the ELC, we would have like the Herpetological Society come in and bring animals into the school, and just being able to have those extra activities that although, you know, you might not be able to sit down and do a standardized test and talk about the frog that you got to handle or the lizard that you got to touch, that's going to be, I think, what really gets kids excited about nature. So just bringing it doesn't necessarily have to be live animals, of course, but just finding ways to bring nature into the classroom and making it relevant and real for the students, I think is the most important next step.
Just to add a comment on, I think that one of the great things about working at the ELC was a lot of the programming that we did. There was always something tied into it. There was a take-home activity, whether it was take back to the classroom, something that the kids were already learning about in school, so that when they came out, it was kind of like they had a little bit of a background, and then they got to come outside and see. I like how Anna put it in the interview, your neighborhood more so than your backyard. But I think it would be really awesome if we could set up more places like the Environmental Learning Center, whether it's run through a college or through a nonprofit, but just so kids can go on these field trips instead of just going to the zoo and, learning about, I think Anna also touched on this in her interview about how the rainforest is dying or whatever big issue we're talking about, having a place where kids can experience their local community, whether it's like an urban garden, if they're in an area, but just having a place that they can tie back into what they're learning in school and maybe something they can do at home.
Yeah, Julie, I think that's a really great point, that it's really important for kids to have that follow-up as well. And that's something that I've noticed has been missing in a lot of like outdoor science schools as well. It's just kind of like the week is over and then that's it. So it would be great to have more activities that they can take home or, just different ways that they can still recreate that in their own neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that you all raised some really good points, making things more localized and centralized around where you're teaching, partnering with other organizations. All of that sounds like, and the fact too that education systems are starting to shift more in that direction is very encouraging. I think that we're also really fortunate to have worked at the Environmental Learning Center because we have kind of an idea of how things should look and how we can shift towards that localized. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about how that's coming into play now with COVID, because I know that in our previous conversations, we've talked about how the pandemic has influenced us individually in our careers, and a little bit about how it affects teachers in the classroom. But for the large group, I'd just like to start talking a little bit more about how we can start to connect more with kids, even if we are doing it through the screen, through Zoom calls, and what that might look like for teachers now.
I think that COVID definitely has presented a bunch of challenges to teachers and educators, just unbelievable challenges. But I think it has also kind of opened people's eyes up to what learning can be done at home. And I think a lot of the learning that can be done at home is exploring your own neighborhood. So I hope that moving forward, as we get through this strange time, we're able to take this learning experience of teaching online and being in an online world and being able to apply that into our lesson plans so that maybe we could do a follow-up with a Zoom call where we go run outside and find like 3 different things with different textures and then bring it back in, because exploring in your neighborhood is slightly different than exploring in your classroom. You have the opportunity to go outside if you can. So,
yeah, I definitely agree with what Julie was saying. And I don't think I have a lot more to add on top of that. But I think that question, Hannah, is kind of the ultimate question in education in general right now is how do you connect through a screen? And I think like Julie was saying, environmental education gives us a route to still allow kids to learn and explore without necessarily having to sit in front of a screen and a lecture the whole time. Like you can send them out and be like, go out and find this, like Julie was saying, or, go out and explore this and then write about your experience. And so just making it more interactive and a little bit less lecture based, which I know is challenging, of course, at different ages. But I think environmental education does give us a route to allow students to hopefully connect with their environment a little more despite everything that's going on.
Yeah, you're right, Anna. That is just the question right now. And definitely just trying to figure out how you can take something that is supposed to be kind of a tangible education and make it virtual. That's a really difficult thing to do. And I know I've talked about this with some of my past educators, and we've kind of joked around like, making like TikTok videos or something like that. Just being able to like find a way to connect with kids, I guess, and make it kind of a quick mini lesson. So that way it's not super lecture-y, but it's still some sort of way that they can discover it on their own. I think that would just kind of be the ideal lesson. But obviously it's kind of hard to do that with like, maybe like earth sciences can be kind of a hard one to recreate in their backyard or but there are some other ones that might be doable, like maybe like photosynthesis or even leaf identification. those are definitely a little bit easier for kids to be able to do at their own home, or for teachers to be able to give them a lesson that they can just follow. But yeah, it's pretty difficult right now, I think.
Aileen, those are great suggestions. And I like the idea too of trying to find those relatable education pieces that you can still teach kids, even if you are teaching from outside your classroom. So those are really great points. I know that there are a lot of systemic issues, and we talked a little bit about the schools, but I also like to think a little bit more about the barriers that are really evident in our education system and what might be influencing environmental education today. So if any of you would like to share stories that maybe have something to do with your personal experience or something that you've observed, challenges that you've had to address while teaching?
I don't know if you all got a chance to see the Real Rock documentaries for this year, but there was one that was called Black Ice, and they are so the documentary is about a group of Black climbers that go ice climbing for the first time. And they're from Memphis, Tennessee, so they have never seen snow before. And they really open up about how their climbing gym is kind of a safe space for a lot of the, I guess, mostly kids, but also some adults in the neighborhood that kind of just need that sort of safe space to go to, or they kind of need like an outlet. And I thought that was just a really great idea. It's a really great way to kind of bring that into a community. And I mean, you could put like a climbing gym anywhere. And just finding those different ways to be able to bring the outdoors into different communities, I think is really important. And I know I've heard of a lot of other organizations who have made like urban gardens, and they can put that anywhere in the city, really. And that's a really great way for a whole neighborhood to get involved into this beautiful garden. And there's so many different lessons that you can implement into that as well. So I think just finding, I guess just having those communities that can actually start up those organizations is really important. Because I don't think that it's impossible. I think it's just difficult to start up, but yeah, just really having those people who really believe and who are really like those kind of go-getter personalities.
I kind of wanted to touch on what you said, Aileen, about just having that community, because I feel like a lot of reasons that there's so much environmental education related to privilege and people that have the money to do these outdoor sports, and these people that are comfortable then go into environmental education. Like a lot of times it's these people that have privilege, and it's not really, the equity and the equality isn't really there. But I think the community aspect is so important. I remember hearing this special on NPR, and it was talking about this Black woman, and she had hiked the whole Colorado Trail, and she did it pretty much to make a statement that like people of color like belong in the outdoors. So I think stuff like that, where people hear about people that look like them doing these things, and then secondary after that, like being invited to have that experience. Like if you've never been on a hike before, those clubs where it's like Latinas in the outdoors, people of color in the outdoors, women in the outdoors, you know, just having that introduction, I think is really, really integral to fostering that stewardship. If we want more people to be involved in environmental education and caring about the environment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, both Julie and Aileen. I think it's like you were saying, it's really valuable to make sure that we're seeing through different forms of media, that we're seeing people of different backgrounds out in nature and out doing environmental careers and stuff, because I think there is kind of a mindset that there is a certain type of person and a person from a type of background that tends to do these kind of jobs. And so I think it's a huge step to be able to, share media, documentaries, movies, books that show people of all backgrounds, all skin colors getting outside and just investing into this outdoor space. I'm trying to think too. Hannah, the question cut out a little bit when you were asking it, so I hope I'm addressing all the parts you were asking. But I think you were talking about systemic challenges in environmental education. And so I think also one thing that I've experienced when I was working for an educational nonprofit called Canyonlands Field Institute in Moab last year, one thing I thought was really cool was they had this Native Teen Guide and Training Week where they had Indigenous students would come and they would learn how to be river guides basically for a week. And so just recognizing that even people who might be growing up locally in an area or might really be associated with the landscape are still being barred from these outdoor jobs and stuff. And so just having these trainings, having the ability to just invite these people out and make sure that they're included and seen in the environmental world.
Yeah, Anna. Sorry. Yeah, I think those are really great points. And I think something to add to that. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I think just kind of also being able to make them feel very comfortable in those spaces. I've noticed that with some of the kids that have come up to the mountains and, this is their first time out, it kind of makes me sad. Sometimes I will hear them say, "Oh, I don't think I can," and or "I'm not good enough to do that." Or one time I had a child who I gave them we were giving out like prizes, and I gave this kid a prize and he was really taken back and he was like, "I'm a bad kid." And it really broke my heart to hear him say that. And so I guess just really being a role model for them and really, I guess, giving them the confidence to be outside as well and just, really not trying to take any experiences away from them as much as possible. And just being as encouraging as you can be and really creating that safety.
I just wanted to bring up one more topic that kind of relates to what you were saying, Eileen, about making people feel comfortable when you bring them out in that outdoor setting. I think something that we tried to focus on when I was at the ELC was inclusivity in the fact of using people's pronouns and addressing your group with certain terms. And really, it's so hard to change the way you talk, like saying "you guys" and changing it to "friends," but making those kind of conscious decisions to use different words really does affect people's experience because they'll feel more included if you're using certain language. So I think environmental education really taught me that the way that you address a group of people is so important in terms of how their experience ends up going.
Yeah, to kind of build off of that, Julie, I've been learning recently, we get in the Moab area, we get some radio stations from the Navajo Nation. So sometimes in the work truck, I get to listen to that. And it's just been really unique and just something I haven't been exposed to before. But really, like you said, our language is so powerful. And just, for example, a lot of tourists will come here and talk about the rock art or the evidence of ancient Native American people groups that were here in the area. And they tend to refer to the indigenous people in the past tense, which I think I definitely have been guilty of doing a lot. And just recognizing those little language changes of these are people groups who are still here. They're still on the landscape. And it doesn't make sense to use the past tense when we're talking about it. And just like you said, the correct pronouns and just making sure that people feel comfortable and welcome in those spaces.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and experiences. These are really important conversations that not just apply to the environmental field, but really we should be having a lot more of. And I wanted to branch off with that a little bit too, when you all were talking about, building safe spaces where everyone feels included, using personal language that everyone can relate to and being inclusive that way. And talk a little bit more about what it means as the teacher to be building those connections, what it looks like to be coming from a different background than some of your students, or whether they're children or adults that are coming, and whether it is an education lesson or in your personal life. How do you make those connections and bridge those gaps?
The first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about making someone feel kind of ready to explore the outdoors if they haven't done it before is kind of balancing that, okay, where are they comfortable with being out in the outdoors and where are they like really uncomfortable? And I can't remember where I learned this, but somewhere in between that comfort zone and that really uncomfortable zone is like your grow zone. So finding that, like, let's try this new thing you haven't done, and like not making you have a complete like freak out, I think is a really amazing thing to find with students. And then they can really see what they're able to do. And then once they're comfortable doing it, maybe their comfort zone kind of gets bigger in the outdoors. So that's kind of an experience that I've had working with the community, is figuring out, okay, where are you at with being in the outdoors? What do you know from a baseline? And then, well, what can we show you and what can you try today?
Yeah, I think, Julie, I've heard similar descriptions of the grow zone, and I think I've heard it described as type 2 fun. Type 1 fun being like, it's fun in the moment. Type 2 fun being it's fun when you look back on it, but maybe not necessarily in the moments. And I specifically remember one hike working again, Canyonlands Field Institute in Moab last year. We did some summer camps, and we would do those camps up in the La Salle mountain range outside of Moab because it's 100 degrees in Moab in the summer and not really fun to do camps in town. And so we were up in the mountains, and we had a lot of local students that would attend those summer camps. And we had one student who had never really been on a hike before, and we were hiking up a mountain essentially. And she was just convinced. She was like, I can't do this. I can't do this hike. And just was starting to shut down. And I had a conversation with her about like, I know you can do this. It doesn't matter if you're slower than the other students. Like, you're going to make it up. I know you can. Take your time. We're going to make it. You're going to be fine. We'll drink lots of water. And I felt a little guilty near the end because she started crying as we got close to the peak, but it was like tears of relief because she was just like so excited that she made it. And I kind of had this fear of, oh no, I ruined hiking forever for this student. But then later she at the end of the week when her parents picked her up, she was so excited about like, I hiked a mountain. I did this. Like, can we go hiking again, Mom? Like, there are all these trails around here, and just how excited she was. And it was definitely that type 2 fun where she just got to have that pride of knowing that she was capable and she could do those things. And I just hope that led to her being outdoors more and going on more hikes in the future.
Yeah, that's a great story. And that's a really great example of just kind of being able to challenge your students enough. And maybe it feels like you're challenging them a little too much in the moment, but obviously you really hit that perfect zone for her to be able to grow afterwards. And I think that's the beautiful thing about environmental education is once they do this really challenging thing, they're so proud of themselves for being able to do that. And they didn't think that they were capable of doing that before. And I think it's really important when you're going through those challenges with your students to just be able to talk to them like they're people and be able to communicate with them like an adult almost. And I think a lot of kids, they get talked down to. And I think it's just that will help them to feel a little bit more included and involved. And it's very encouraging to be talked to, obviously, like an adult and not just talked down to. And I think that's just a really great way to open up a relationship with your students. And I know for myself, I'll try really hard to talk to all of my students throughout the week and find some sort of connection with them. And so that way we all just have some sort of personal relationship with one another.
Great. Yeah, those are great stories. Thanks, Eileen. So kind of building off of that too, because we're talking about how important it is to find that perfect soft spot where the kids are growing and learning at a rate that feels comfortable to them. We talked a little bit in previous episodes about what it means to be an educator and that we're learning as we're teaching too. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about what you all use to kind of increase your own education, whether you're able to bring that to a lesson that you might have taught in the past, or just regular conversations that you have with people in your everyday life. What types of things, resources, role models, activities, podcasts, what do you use?
So I think in me and Hannah's one-on-one, we are talking about the books that we were currently reading. And I, for some reason, just gravitate towards reading nature nonfiction books. So I think that exploring your own interests within the realm of natural resources and the environment, there's so much to learn. Like, you think you know something, and then you realize that there's so many other things you need to know. So I really enjoy reading physical books, and then, you know, blabbing on about it to my family and friends. And sometimes they enjoy it, and sometimes they're like, that's cool, I guess. But I think that also when Anna was talking in the previous interview, she kind of touched on how she's a lifelong learner. And I think looking at environmental education is kind of a lifelong experience, that you're always learning, you're always building a relationship to be closer to the environment is a really good outlook to have on it. And there's no ceiling to what you can learn about our natural world.
Yeah, so I think expanding a little bit off of what Julie said, to introduce another really cheesy cliche phrase on top of lifelong learner, I think is maintaining a sense of wonder, I think is important for being an environmental educator. I think when you're getting outside and you're able to recognize that you don't know everything, and you're able to ask questions, I like to refer to my hikes more as wanders, because I'm not good at just like taking off and hiking through. I want to stop. I want to touch the plants. I want to look at everything and just be generally distracted. And I think when you're able to do that and you're able to look at a leaf and wonder, why is it green or why is it yellow? Or you're able to look at a lizard and you're like, I don't know what type of lizard that is. Realizing that you don't know everything gives you the opportunity to go and learn about it. So getting out, having that sense of wonder, being curious and asking questions are all going to be things that will allow you to grow, because you're going to be able to follow up and try and answer those questions for yourself. And of course, build more questions and more questions on top of those.
Yeah, I think those are really great answers. And I know for myself, and I guess it was kind of a past inside joke with some other educators from one of my schools. One of our follow-up questions with students is we would never really give them the answer. So we would always just ask them, what do you think? And I know I try to do that for myself as well when I'm learning a little bit more, and not just finding the answer straight away, just kind of digging a little deeper into my own question, or also just being really observant of the way that some of the other educators teach and what their methods are. I think that's a really great way to learn more, is just to watch other people. Because I love the way that someone else will do something, and I'll love something else from someone else. And I'll just kind of maybe combine those things and kind of make something out of that for like a lesson. So I think that's a really great way to learn as well.
Yeah, I also wanted to add to that, Eileen, because I think, yeah, I've grown similarly. I know when I first started at the ELC, my first environmental education job, And you might remember Hannah, I think we started the same year. There were some really big personalities that year. Just some people they were awesome educators. But I remember being a little bit intimidated. And I felt like I needed to mimic these other educators, and I needed to do things in the exact same style that they were doing it. And it took me a while to realize that I can learn a lot from these other educators and take parts of their little tips and tricks and styles and stuff. But ultimately, you need to have your own personal style. And it might be a Frankenstein monster combination of all the different educators you've seen throughout your life. And it's always growing and evolving. But I think one of the keys to success of being an environmental educator is being able to take those things and rather than mimic them, make them into your own and incorporate your own style.
I just have to chime in on that because I agree so much with having those experiences of working with people that have a polar opposite personality and just being so envious, that they have so much energy and that they're so captivating. And it took me a while to realize that that's not fully who I am. And I think working at the ELC was such a great opportunity because not only did we get to work with so many other educators, but we got to collaborate every week and kind of talk about what was working and what wasn't working and the successes we had. And I learned so much from all of my coworkers at the ELC just by seeing how they succeeded and honestly how they failed. And I think that another aspect of learning was the stuff that you learn from the kids. It's so strange. You think you know more than they do. And then I remember this specific experience that I had working at the ELC in the summer, and we had the high school kids come and they would help with each group with the younger kids. And I can't remember his name, but he knew so much about owls. And it just happened to be that day that a great horned owl flew by and he was telling the kids so much about it. And I was just in awe. I was like, wow, I just learned so much from this, 15-year-old boy. So I think just always being open to learning and listening to what other people have to say in their own personal experiences.
Yes, you all had so much good things to say that I wanted to talk about too. But that last point that Anna and Julie you made about just finding your own teaching style and how difficult it is at first to kind of figure out your best way to connect with kids is really challenging. So I'd like to finish up with just asking all of you what advice you might have for other educators. And even if you could go back in time and kind of give yourself advice, what would you say?
Yeah, so I really appreciate the way you all worded that just not comparing yourself to others. And that's definitely something that I would have told myself at the beginning, is just to not compare myself to other educators, especially just starting off and, being really nervous to talk to kids even, and just telling myself just to kind of go with the flow. Just being in the moment, I guess, too. I think that would have been my words of advice to my younger self.
I think I would have given myself similar advice. I think I would have told myself that nothing's going to go right. It really isn't. Let's be honest. You're going to embarrass yourself and kids aren't even going to notice what's going on. So just go with it. Expect the unexpected and everything's going to be fine. Be silly, because kids love when you're being silly and you just mess up, and it's going to be okay. And just learn from every single time you make those mistakes and try to become a better educator and a better support system for these kids is kind of the main takeaway that I've had and what I would tell myself.
Yeah, I would say for me, the advice I would give to other educators and to myself in the past would just be flexible, be adaptable. I think that's really key in environmental education, because when you're working both with people and outdoors, things are never going to go according to plan, or they do very rarely. So just be flexible, be adaptable, And then don't worry so much about what people think. And I think Eileen and Julie both touched on that. Just, you're always going to have that, that parent chaperone or that teacher who you're kind of worried to get goofy in front of. But the goal is to connect with the kids and get the kids invested. And if being goofy is what's going to do that, then that's what you got to do, and just roll with it and just have fun. So that'd be my thing, is just being flexible and just letting go a little bit.
Well, thank you all so much for your time today and for the previous episodes. I really hope that anyone listening will go back and listen to our previous episodes together, because all of our conversations, including this one, have been really insightful and have been really full of great tips and advice from all three of these wonderful people. So thank you again for your time and for just being here.
Thank you for having us on here, Hannah. It's been a pleasure talking about environmental education, how to better it, maybe give some advice to people. So it's been awesome.
Ditto. Thank you.
Oops. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, same thing.
All right. Thank you all so much. I think that was a great episode, and I'm glad that we had the chance to come back and have this final conversation, just to make it more, there's like more breadth to it, and to be able to talk about these conversations with all of these different insights and all of our experiences. And it's still so cool that we can just have this common thread of the ELC to come back to that ties us together. I miss working with all of you.